All right, Alex Jones, this is just kind of after the show. I want, because I know this was a topic that's going to take a little bit longer to unpack. You were just talking about sort of demonic apparitions and what they do in Silicon Valley. Now, here's one thing I will say. I have not had any experience with DMT or like hallucinogenic drugs. But I do know that Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo have talked about this, and it's fascinating to me that they've talked about having shared hallucinations, which you don't really get when it's a hallucination, right? If it's in your mind, if it's just something that you're deep there in your subconscious or your cerebellum is conjuring up, you wouldn't all see the same thing. And this is something that other people have talked about in taking these drugs. Here's kind of, and this is what I thought was very interesting, and I think there were some misconnections sometimes with you and Eddie and Joe a little bit, what specifically once the pot came out. But I did think was interesting that you were bringing up was talking about kind of this historical opening of a door. And as a Christian, I do believe this. Certainly if you're taking all kinds of hallucinogenic drugs, you're opening a door and distancing yourself from God where you might be more prone to, let's call it, demonic or evil influence. Is that a relatively accurate kind of interpretation?
That is exactly what I was trying to say. I don't take DMT. I've not taken that. I've never taken ayahuasca. And I've talked to hundreds of people. It's the total rage for like 15 years where I live in Austin. And a lot of these are doctors, they're scientists, and they go, yeah, we were down in Peru, or we were down in Costa Rica, or we were down in Belize, and there was 20 of us, there was 50 of us, there was 100 of us, and we saw the spaceship land, and the aliens walk out, and we all saw the same aliens, and they all, and I'm like, listen, but the doctor goes, this medical doctor I know, he goes, but I think that's just the chemical. And I'm like, no, dude, you don't all see the same thing. It lowers the veil the Bible talks about, where you can see, your eyes see a lot more than just visible light. They're part of your brain. And so God has given us blinders so that we can operate the third dimension and not go crazy, seeing all the other stuff going on around us in other dimensions. And so that's really what this comes down to. And San Francisco and the microdosing LSD elites and all of them, you see these CEOs on TV and they're under hot lights and you can't even see their eyes. It's nothing but pupils.
Right.
They are obsessed with this. And when I was a kid growing up, my parents had some friends that were research scientists out in San Francisco. They came to visit once. So I'm like 7, 8 years old at the dinner table hearing about government research projects where instead of trying to go into space, they're like trying to contact, and how they were having government people take huge amounts of drugs to contact the Clockwork Elves. So I heard about that, and I talked about it over a decade ago, and people researched it and found Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary talking about it. And basically, they look like gray aliens, except they wear little elf hats, little green outfits, and that's who you talk to at least level 1 taking the drugs. And again, I know dozens and dozens and dozens of people that go to ayahuasca and DMT cults because they're all seeing and interacting with the same thing. It might be a 200-foot tall praying mantis. It might be a giant demon. It might be a bunch of little gray aliens. Either our brains are all psychic and are syncing up with somebody, and then one leader in the group's causing a hallucination. Maybe that's happening. Or we're breaking through and something real is happening. Biblically, you read about it, the Bible says, do not go to the sorcerers and take pharmakia. The symbol of the grinder and the bowl means drugs.
Right.
Because that's what the magicians in every culture would grind up hallucinogens, take them, and they go, the gods say build a pyramid or build an altar and throw babies into it. Whether it was the Babylonians or whether it was the earlier Egyptians, or whether it was the Druids, or whether it was the Aztecs.
Are you going to go back to the Bacchanalians, the parties that they would have? That's where debauchery comes from. A lot of people don't realize this. The term debauchery comes from the Bacchanalians, the parties that they would have, where they were drug-induced, where people would come out of a human orgy pile missing a limb. The idea that sort of low, and Joe Rogan is talking about this. This is why I did think this was an interesting topic, and I did think that maybe Joe and Eddie can't necessarily explore it as deeply since they do partake a little bit more. That's not a condemnation on their choices. I just think they may be somewhat uncomfortable with this idea. When you do lower...
And let's be clear. You read about Nero.
Yes.
And people. He would dress up like a werewolf, this is in the Roman histories, and have a kid tied up to a pole and run in with a wolf skin on his back and kill a kid. Exactly. These elites take drugs like voodoo to try to interface with something evil. So an Eddie Bravo, a Joe Rogan, they're nice guys. So they go and it's a little alien saying, I'm your friend, I'm your spirit guide, come visit me more. But people that get deeper into it, the spirit guide, just like the Bible says, leads you somewhere very, very bad. And again, why do we think aliens are going to come from space? they're going to come from another dimension. Again, I agree. They're not aliens. They've always been with us, and it's demonic. And listen, you can search engine this. We have human-animal hybrids now. We have babies that have been genetically edited. We have world government. I mean, it's all here, and I'm not saying I even have the answers. Right. All I'm saying is the establishment is obsessed with communicating via pharmakeia drugs with other entities, just like in every history book, in every culture, they always were.
Right. And I do think that's important for people to note that, listen, I know they'll say, well, Christians believe that God told them this. Okay, absolutely. But the difference is if you look at a lot of pagan cultures, and like some of the cultures that you just mentioned, they all say, well, God told me this. And usually there's some kind of a drug or chemically induced influence when you look at the great acts of evil and barbarism. Even talking
because
about
it's lower level. Exactly. It's a lower dimension. You access the devil through drugs and jacking with what God already gave us. But they know through higher levels, chemicals are released in the brain. During prayer, during emotional moments, you're higher with God. That's when you get love and grace and the universe, and it's all good. But you get into the occult, all of it's bad. None of it's good.
Right. And I know Joe and Eddie have talked about lowering your inhibitions quite a bit, even if it's just marijuana, as a good thing. And in a certain... There's a component to that I probably agree with. Sometimes people might be a little bit uptight. Listen, it's why the Bible says that wine makes for a warm heart, brings good. I don't know, good cheer, cheery spirit. I don't know. I'm very tired.
Yeah, Jesus turned the water into wine. He didn't turn it into grape juice.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, that's very important to note, especially when you understand modern fermentation techniques that they wouldn't have had back then. The wine would have kept fermenting until someone was drinking it. But there's specifically a verse about wine makes for. I don't know the exact verse. We'll have to get Gerald back in here about it. Bringing a good cheer, a warm heart, warm spirit, but it does praise wine. And again, it wouldn't really praise wine in that sense if it were grape juice. There is a value to a...
Well, I think it's all in moderation. The point is wine doesn't make you see demons.
No, exactly. My point is there's value in a mild social lubricant that's very different from changing the way your brain functions to the point where you're not able to make the same kinds of decisions, even though wine a little bit is fine, but drunkenness would be closer.
Exactly. It's like Avatar, the movie Avatar. They believe they're taking drugs, whether it's voodoo or black magic or any of this, so that something else can come in and run you.
Right.
And that's what this is you're giving yourself over to something else, and you're being influenced by a interdimensional, off-world, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, thing that wants to kill, steal, and destroy. I mean, you read the Bible, and then you see what people, the experiences they have on ayahuasca and DMT, it is satanic. And so that's why, I like Joey's a nice guy. He's like, hey, you should take DMT. And I'm like, no freaking way, man. It's not even a fear-based thing. It's the losing control, and then like I'm in a damn room with a 200-foot praying mantis. I was talking to one of the crew members, and he took it about a year ago, and he was in this room with a 200-foot praying mantis for like 10 years. It felt like, telling him, submit to me.
That sounds like The Mist.
Yeah.
It sounds absolutely
terrible. Fun to me.
No, it doesn't sound very fun to me. I did notice you talking with Eddie Bravo, and because he used to be more of a UFO guy, and he did say, no, I don't think they're coming. I think they're traveling through dimensions, and maybe I think at one point he said maybe they're coming from below. He seemed as though he was more open to your point of view on this. And by the way, I'm not taking any particular sides here or saying that I agree with you 100%, Joe or Eddie, but is there have there ever been some off-air conversations with Eddie where you're maybe witnessing a little bit?
I mean, I think Eddie overall is a Christian, and I think Joe's coming along, and I have had a lot of off-air conversations with those guys. But I mean, I think Joe's really a genuine guy who wants to get along with everybody, and that's how he kind of got sucked in and was being nice to the corporate establishment, and then he saw the giant backlash to it, and that kind of got him back. So he did a good job. I guess on Thursday, or was it Wednesday? Whatever. This was Tuesday. Days all fly by me. This was Tuesday of this week. Confronting them. So I'm just glad. I don't think those guys are bad guys. I think they're good guys. But yeah, I've been having arguments with Eddie about all this because, like, jet airplanes are real. Science is real. They say that I said the moon landing never happened. I never said that. We were just willing to have astronauts die back then. We're not willing to have astronauts die today. Mm-hmm. And there was a secret military operation where a lot of them did die. People like Neil Armstrong, who was a test pilot in the X-15 and other things. There were other guys that died in secret missions to pave the way for the public missions. And so they go, oh, Jones says the moon landing's fake, and then they never show what I said, or all these things I didn't say. But notice when I get into all the...
You do believe we've landed on the moon?
Oh, yeah. Well, Stephen, 90% of what they say I said is like, I'll say Hillary Clinton is personally responsible for murdering children in Syria by funding the Arab Spring. where men take children and murder them and torture them or sell their body parts. And I'm reading news articles.
Right.
And then Megyn Kelly edited it on Fox News and said that I said in a pizza place they were murdering kids in a basement.
Right.
I mean, it's just next level how they lie.
Well, I just wanted to clarify for our listeners, you do believe that we landed on the moon. I just want to make sure that everyone is clear. And I will say this because I do, and like you talked about with your father working at UT, I believe your dad was a scientist, correct?
Yes.
My grandfather was a colonel in the Air Force, actually, would have made general if he had a college degree. He trained all the fighter pilots, basically, who worked for the Air Force, would have had to have been trained by my grandfather. He was out of Michigan. And, my dad used to have astronauts over for dinner, right? They would run in the same circles. People of at a very, at a certain military rank, it's very common. And of course, a lot of those fighter pilots would go on to work for NASA. So sometimes personal experience does inform a worldview. It's hard to communicate that though sometimes because other people haven't had that same experience. And this is one thing I wanted to ask you. You talked about on Joe Rogan's show quite a bit. This is just sort of a personal conversation here. I'm glad that we're doing this as an extended version. You talked about sort of the psychosis that comes in with seeing a lot of these conspiracies, seeing them play out, and then maybe at one point you were looking for conspiracies in too many places because you had seen the corruption. And I think that's fair. And you brought up the syphilis in, I believe, Guatemala, Peru. I think you brought up Peru, but they brought up the source for Guatemala, which, this is terrible. Hillary Clinton did apologize for that, and it seems unfathomable for Americans to understand some of these things that
exactly. And so once you see 10 or 15 times that criminals in government, mad scientists do bad things, you start projecting the pattern. And I only say this because it's true. I mean, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I kind of got where so much stuff was fake. I thought, well, this is fake. Well, that's fake. No, that's just where they had it organized. Most people in government aren't bad. They're good on average. So I began to realize it was like a psychosis where everything was a conspiracy. Everything was staged. And then I would see the world I wanted to see through that. I'm just being honest about it. And I really learned that because some of my listeners, they would then project onto me stuff that I knew wasn't true. And they were so sure that I was Bill Hicks, or they were so sure that I was covering up Sandy Hook once I said I thought it happened. Yeah. It's like once you kind of get but isn't that the media and the government's fault? And that they lie so much, they've been caught lying so much that once they've been caught, you can't blame people anymore. I mean, if I lied to my kids all the time, and then I told them the truth about something, I said, hey, you got a new bicycle out there in the yard, or I got you a new motorcycle, or I got you a new skateboard. And I'd lied to them 50 times. There was never a skateboard out there. And they would finally say, no, Dad, I don't believe it, even though there was a brand new skateboard or bicycle out there. So at a certain point, the psychosis is what is real. And I think somebody like Eddie Bravo has just gone to the other extreme where I'm like, hey, I'll hire a ship. We'll go find that the earth is round. Yeah. And at a certain, and he just says, oh no, it's flat. I'm not going to look into it. Well, at a certain point, he's kind of like gone,
Because you just brought up the Bill Hicks thing, and I got to say, it's a very entertaining conspiracy. You do look strikingly like Bill Hicks. Like if someone were to say that you were related, I would say, okay, I believe it. For example, if you were like a brother or an uncle. But here's the thing. Of course, I don't believe in that conspiracy. Let me be really clear. But the fact that
I'm the gay clone of Bill Hicks. Right. I am the gay clone.
But the fact that you just addressed it, that people are going to go nuts in the comment section saying that's just more proof that he's clearly Bill Hicks, right? You've experienced this now.
Listen, I'm in restaurants like 6 or 7 times and people go, hey, Bill. Right. And it's kind of like asking Dan Rather, what's the frequency? And when you finally turn around because someone's yelling, hey, Bill, they go, I knew it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And you're...
Now, are you ever concerned, since now you've experienced it, that you've maybe done that in the past with a conspiracy where you've sort of seen confirmation bias where someone was trying to say, no, this isn't true, and maybe you did that?
Yeah, that's what it is. It's confirmation bias because you've seen Operation Northwoods and Gladio and Gulf of Tonkin and blah, 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 and then you see Smollett. I have more people walk on the street and go, well, look at Jussie Smollett. That was staged. You shouldn't have backed off on Sandy Hook. Well, I never even quote. I always just questioned. I wasn't the guy that first brought up Sandy Hook. I questioned it. I thought it happened. That made them sue me. It's like, oh, we got him now. He says it's real. He must have lied earlier. But like Jussie Smollett, I mean, how many of these hate crimes are fake? So then when there's a real hate crime, if I question it, am I saying hate crimes don't happen? No. But it's like babies in incubators to get us in the Iraq War. They knew it was a lie. They had a PR firm. So if there was more babies thrown out of incubators, I would say, is this staged? Then it may turn out it's real in a future war. And then I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, but I had to question. See how it kind of, I say it's a psychosis. It's a psychosis when our authority figures lie to us over and over and over again. Then we start not knowing what's true.
Right. I understand that, and I would ask this when I was watching your your show, the whole segment with, particularly when Eddie Bravo came out. So that's why I'm saying segment in my mind, because it was a little bit different, right? It took a bit of a different direction. For example, you brought up syphilis, Guatemala, Peru. You bring up, you brought up a few different issues that are obviously true that we would.
They didn't know the governor of Virginia wants to kill babies after they're born.
Well, no, that was a miscommunication. He was trying to sort of be facetious there, and I think that you didn't understand that Eddie Bravo was being facetious.
No, I know he was later, but I'm saying Joe didn't know, and I'm not knocking Joe for that. I think it's normal to not believe we're killing babies after they're born.
Yeah, well, we've done Change My Mind on abortion, and most people don't believe it when I tell them what abortion actually is. And then most people who watch the Change My Mind don't believe that every single person disagreed with me. Once we brought out the fetal chart, if they are pro-choice today, they go, we have to support abortion. Every single one, with the exception of 2, ever.
I've seen your videos, like 10 million views. That's what I'm saying. That's why they want to shut you down. You're reasonable. You're showing them facts. They cannot stand us talking to them.
Well, hold on a second. I want to get back to your point. We're getting down a rabbit hole, because this was the point I wanted to bring up. For example, you started getting in the rabbit hole of Nazis, and like we talked about, sort of clockwork elves. And yes, all very interesting issues. But for me, and this is why I haven't really delved into a lot of conspiracies, and I have the luxury of not doing that because I'm late night host. This is more comedy. But it's because when I look at all these conspiracies, I go, well, hold on a second. We don't need a conspiracy to prove that socialism, that communism, that socialist dictatorships have murdered hundreds of millions of people. We don't need a conspiracy to show that the biggest fight right now, you look at Venezuela, and then you look at people here in the United States government who go, well, you know what, they just didn't do it right. We supported Chavez before, but we can do better than Venezuela with socialism.
AOC will not decry it.
Right, exactly. To me, I go, well, I want to keep my powder dry for those issues that I see as super pivotal that are out in plain sight. Do you ever have any regrets that maybe people kind of roped you off as nothing but a conspiracy guy, when I know that you've also talked about these other sort of macro issues?
Well, that's exactly what's going on. It's easy when you're in the air 4 hours a day. Because I've learned, I used to do satire because it's fun, and I used to do devil's advocate. I don't do it now because they take it out of context.
Right.
And they edit it together. Like, my show's been video for 15 years. But notice most of the stuff you'll see on national television, it's audio.
Right.
Because they're editing it. It's obvious when it's jump cuts on video. So I'm not even defending myself. I've said some things that are wrong. I've gone overboard sometimes. I've certainly learned a lot as I've gotten older. And especially since I've been kind of put through the paces of the whole conspiracy world and people not believing anything. But absolutely, most of what I cover and what I do is right out of the news, just like you do. I go, oh, look, Rand Paul says Afghan war, end it, pay for all soldiers, and a victory bonus. I mean, most of what I do is just objectively. Here's an InfoWars.com story. Dozens arrested for erecting anti-migrant Christian cross in Greece. Government announces it's hurtful to Muslims. Arrest everyone. That's dangerous. That's a real story linked to the government making its own announcement saying, don't you Christians try doing that. So 95% of what I do is already cut and dry, real information. And I can't even get people to admit what's going on. Like you just said, socialism within 10 years wrecks every country, creates collapse, total nightmares, communism even worse. Do we have to test it again? Right. And so a lot of this is prima facie. It's on its face, and it's like, how do we deal with this? So what happened with me is, that you ask, Hillary looked at one of her biggest opponents, one of the biggest supporters of Trump. They said, this guy's got a very colorful past, a lot of stuff we can take out of context. For my own entertainment, I go crazy on air at least once a day. Let's go get this colorful person. Let's edit it out of context and make it Trump. Then Trump won. So then they believed their own propaganda, had shows like Homeland and shows on Comedy Central about me, and built me into Godzilla coming out of the ocean against Tokyo. And so now 2.5 years later, they keep blasting me with tanks and missiles and everything, trying to make me go away. And it's like they just keep building and building and building. The truth is, we're bigger and more successful than we've ever been, Stephen. And the thing is, they won't stop. They've got the tanks and the laser beams hitting me. I'm like, I'm not Godzilla.
Well, I ask you that because you say we're bigger and more successful than ever, but I did hear you say on Joe Rogan show that once they figured out iTunes, that really devastated you. So,
I did feel iTunes. Yeah, but like, exactly. One door closes, another one opens. Oh, I mean, absolutely. It's kind of like putting toothpaste back in a tube. Yes, they did a lot of things that for a month hit us really hard, but then it totally grew over here. It's kind of like putting a genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. Because you can't really put toothpaste back in the tube. It's probably not the best analogy.
And I'm not up here trying to say, oh, I'm great. No, I'm so successful. I'm simply saying they don't even get what they're doing.
Right.
Because it's like Twitter said, Alex Jones is banned for life. I mean, if I was a child kidnapper, they wouldn't say for life most of the time. Right. But now they're like, oh, a road to redemption. They want to terrify people that if you don't do what we say, and if you talk bad about the radical Muslims, you're banned for life. And you better not have Alex Jones on. I mean, I love Joe to death, and he had the courage to have me on. They were like nervous when I was going on and the countdown that they'd be banned because they had me on. And I just said, Joe, Hollywood and big tech's a sinking ship. Why do you even care? And he goes, no, you're right. I don't care. He goes, I wasn't selling out to these folks. I just get busy with life and don't want conflict. But you're right. It's caused more conflict, not having you on and not going after these people. I'm going to do it. And I talked to Joe the other day. He goes, I feel so good. He goes, I'm going to tear the hell out of Twitter. He goes, watch, but just don't announce it yet. And he feels good now, and he's on cloud nine. He's being himself, the Joe I knew.
But he said to Tim Pool, he said, I'm very liberal. The only issue I disagree with liberals on is the Second Amendment. So, because Tim Pool sort of sarcastically said, you're basically a socialist, Joe. I mean, you're just more liberal. And Joe said, yeah, I'm very liberal except on the Second Amendment. In my interactions with him, that hasn't been the case. Certainly the First Amendment, I wouldn't consider him liberal unless he's maybe sort of loosely defining classical.
Yeah, I would call Joe a libertarian, and I think he's trying to live out in L.A. He's trying to get along with them. But I mean, Joe likes guns. He likes bows. So he's like, well, wait, I'm a good guy. Why can't I? Like a cop can have a gun, but I can't. If I'm not a criminal, why can't I have a gun? I mean, I would call Joe a libertarian and a really smart guy, but he's a father, he's pushing 60, and, he wants to just get along, and I get that.
Yeah.
But he now gets, dude, you can't just get along. Your audience isn't just going to let you sit there and play patty cake with Jack Dorsey. It's not happening. So now he sees the great feedback he's gotten. He's not like a leaf in the wind, but he now gets, but people didn't hate him.
Yeah.
They just want him to grow a pair like you've done. Like, I'm not kissing your ass, Stephen, but it's true. You're one of the few people, other than like Mark Dice, who did not completely throw me under the bus when I got banned. Most other conservatives pissed on my grave, said, "Oh yeah, he's bad. Oh, don't ban us."
Well, let me bring this up because I will say something, and I don't want this to get heated here. But I know that you were like, "Well, why didn't you have me on afterwards?" First off, our booking contact doesn't work with you anymore. But do you ever maybe regret sort of going to war with a lot of conservatives? So there was one point where I will say I was like, I don't want to have Alex on right now because you said something about me working for Ben Shapiro on your show, which is not true. And I assume now you were shooting from the hip. But, that's the kind of thing that can kind of rub people the wrong way, where sometimes it's like, well, hold on a second.
No, I agree. And here's the problem. I don't want to say I have psychosis all the time. But you're on air all the time. You're irritated. And later I hear stuff and I go, why did I say that? That's not true. Right. And it's almost like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I was being honest on Joe about it. Sure. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten so confident. Like used to, I was worried about stuff. And now I don't have a governor. And I'm trying to get a governor. Stephen, because now I don't know, you're not as old as I am, but wait till you're like 45 or I've been through here's the problem. The stress never got me down. It made me go crazy. All the attacks, all the lies. I became kind of like a crazy crocodile that just started snapping at people. I love your show. I've always told people I love your show. Right. And if I said something mean, I don't even remember saying that. No, I apologize.
It wasn't mean, and that's why I do want to make sure that I clarify. Yeah, we certainly didn't piss in your grave, and we talked about it quite a bit. I said on air, I said, listen, if you think Jones is off and he's crazy, he's a conspiracy theorist, it can happen to anyone. It very likely at some point will happen to us on a platform. But yeah, on a personal level, I was like, well, hold on, why would he say that I work with Ben Shapiro, and that's why I'm not having him on? And yeah, sometimes those things.
Well, if I said that, I apologize. If I don't remember saying that, believe me, I don't remember half what I say.
Well,
I'm not trying to lie at any level. I guess you're on the air, or maybe you're not on the air. Shapiro has his own thing, right?
Shapiro has his own thing, yeah, with Daily Wire. I believe
and I'm not jealous of Ben Shapiro. I just don't get like every headline, like the genius, the man, the myth, and like a pipe, like and so you're right. You don't work with him. I'm not even against him. I just don't get Michael Savage with top ratings is taken off the air, and then all his radio stations are given to Ben Shapiro.
I have no idea. I didn't even know he was on terrestrial radio, honestly. But Ben's been a longtime friend of mine. He actually I met him through Andrew Breitbart when I was writing there, when it used to be Big Hollywood, before it was called Breitbart anything. And I actually had him negotiate some contracts for me just on an hourly basis because I said, hey, you're Jewish and conservative, and we've been friends. But I've tried to avoid, I will say this, as sort of a philosophy. And a big part of this was Andrew Breitbart, actually. A conservative once attacked me on YouTube about a video that I did on Detroit early on. And Andrew called that person up. I don't even want to honor this person with airtime, so I don't want to get into the specifics of who it is, but someone can search this pretty quickly. I did a video on Detroit where I talked about bear sightings in Detroit. So I talked about the unemployment, how it's been run by far leftists since 1961, really talked about how it's sort of this iconic model leftist city. And in there was a throwaway joke where I said it's gotten so bad that not only are there packs of wild dogs, which there are in Detroit, but there have been bear sightings. Now, the bear sightings I'm going to get to the point here. The bear sightings have only actually occurred outside of city limits, but very close to Detroit. So this person just rakes me over the coals and attacks me as a liar, kind of went to this conspiracy route that I don't know who I was working for. And Andrew called him up, Z. I almost slipped, and said, listen, you don't attack other conservatives, certainly not if we're running on the same platform. Did we lose Alex? Yes, people watching right now terrestrially, yep, we did have to cut. We just lost Skype, so Alex can confirm that this is not some conspiracy. We just lost a connection here. Long story short, Andrew Breitbart called this person and said, listen, a rule of mine is you do not attack other conservatives, particularly if you haven't spoken with them in private and tried to work it out first. And this person refused to retract it, and this person was no longer welcome contributing to any of Andrew's sites. So that's kind of been a defining... Again, since I was just a comedian and actor and then kind of sat under the tutelage of Andrew as I came up in this movement more, I think at 20 years old, that's been a guiding rule for me. That's what I was kind of getting back to. Do you think that if you could do it all over, that would be something that maybe you would give greater importance
Absolutely. To? I've gotten where I have attacked some people. I used to actually follow that rule myself because I'm not a big infighter. And then when people don't stand up for you when you're under attack, you start attacking everybody to let them see what it feels like, because misery loves company.
Right.
But I've been trying to get back to my roots of not doing that. And, the truth is I find Ben Shapiro incredibly handsome. I've got a painting of him on my wall at my home. And I want to marry Ben Shapiro.
Well, you're getting mad at Ben Shapiro, but like Ann Coulter used to really despise, and then you both kind of found yourself coming back in the same camp with Trump. Did you two ever meet? Was that ever awkward? Because you two had some really heated discussions.
I did run into her at the RNC, and I did run into her at a few other events, and I've had her on a few times. And listen, I get where she was coming from now, and I've moved. Here's the thing. I used to almost be kind of liberal. Then I moved more towards libertarian, and then this happens to most people. As I get older, I think more kind of conservative. Mm-hmm. So I used to kind of be a libertarian liberal, then kind of a libertarian, and then now a little bit more conservative in my views. So yeah. And used to, I'd read Ann Coulter saying something. She wouldn't put satire at the end. So she'd go, the Japanese ought to really be thankful for Fukushima. That radiation's really good for you. And I'm like, you idiot, it's killing them. It was a joke, a sick joke. But I was taking it as literal. Now I get that a lot of what she does is satirical. So I like Ann Coulter. I'm really envious of Ben Shapiro and obsessed with him.
All right.
And no, seriously. The point is, I don't want to fight with anybody. You're absolutely right. Now, I think you and I and Ben Shapiro, we should all. Well,
the only reason I brought up his name was because you said that I worked for him, and I was just letting you know that was somewhat irritating because I had to feel like you with Bill Hicks, a bunch of comments going, no, I don't know where this is coming from. Let me ask you this though, we do have to get going. If you want people to know,
you gotta get going.
Alex Jones, if you want people right now watching, they should know Alex Jones as what? What do you want to be known for? What do you want your legacy to most be? You've been a controversial figure. Like you said, you've kind of transitioned from more liberal libertarian to where you are now. How would you want to be remembered or known?
As somebody that wants to live in a free country and a free world, who believes in humanity and who loves private property and God, the Second Amendment, and who's a fan of Americana and who wants to see that continue and wants to defeat people like AOC and little vampire bat Kim Jong-un and the rest of it, and who just, again, isn't going to back down the cultural Marxists and all these bullies. And that's who I am. It's what I stand for. And I believe in America. I bet on America. And I think America is coming back. But I think it's up to people like you and I and all your viewers and listeners who are the brain trust of this country. The people watching you right now are no doubt the most focused, most involved Americans on the planet.
Yeah.
Because there's Americans all over the world. And we really are special. We are something special. There is something that is truly independent and exceptional about America. It's that idea, it's that spirit, it's why people want to come here. And so it's that spirit of America that I'm searching for, and I think I found it, and I'm just glad to be here with you. And anybody that wants to find out what I'm actually saying versus what mainstream media is obsessed with, can visit InfoWars.com or NewsWars.com. And Stephen, anytime you're not busy, which I know you're a hard worker, please come on my show.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and like I said, we wanted to be at South by Southwest here this year, but I've been banned along with every working member of my staff, as far as I know. So we'll have to find some other people. And it's been a weird spell there at South by Southwest. But all right, well, thank you, Infowars.com, Alex. Thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate it, and heal up with your bicep there, brother. Don't go crazy. Don't taking off the cast, but don't go crazy doing preacher curls at the gym or anything.
Don't worry, I won't, Herr Crowder.